Thank you, Kristen. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for planning this during what festival? Cherry Blossom, right? Anybody have a chance to take advantage of that? And so here's a photograph. I always tell people when I speak that I don't have to speak good, right? I'm from Arkansas. We don't speak very good there. So, and I live in West Virginia now. So, and Zach was talking about all these billies earlier, ability, findability, usability, and I'm thinking, well, in West Virginia, that's the people next door to me. You know, and they're proud. You know, that's not derogatory. They love it when you call them a hillbilly. So anyway, that's where I live, and I work in Harpers Ferry, so very fortunate for that. So hopefully some of you, if you haven't had a chance to get out and see the trees full bloom, starting April 1st through this week, so you're here at the perfect time, right? That's me, in case you were wondering. So I was glad Zach pointed out that some of us here speaking are not knowledge management professionals, and because I was afraid actually coming up here in front of you to talk about knowledge management. But I am a practitioner by default because I manage information that goes into our various learning systems and portals for the National Park Service. Who do I work for? Trick question. I work for you, right? I'm a government employee. The national parks are for you. And I just wanted to point out what we do, because sometimes people forget or don't know. Our mission for the National Park Service is to preserve natural and cultural resources of the National Park System for enjoyment, education, inspiration of future generations. Cool mission, right? Sounds easy. And you go to the parks and you meet our folks with their flat hats and you talk with them, and great job. A lot of folks really aspire to do that, and I encourage people to, if that's what you want to do, please. I've only been with the National Park Service 5 years. This is a great job, and I'm so happy to be affiliated with such a great mission. But so why are we here? We're here to talk about how we, in learning development for the National Park Service, apply knowledge management principles. This is the agenda. I'm not going to read that because we're going to go through this. If I can hit the right key, then it will move forward. Our challenge. What is our knowledge management challenge? Well, we have 419 parks as of right now. That number usually grows a few each year, particularly at the end of presidencies. They add several usually each time. We have 16,000 regular employees, but look at what we have helping us do our mission. 350,000 volunteers. You know, who are those people? They're your youth groups. They're the people that go out on trails. They're the organizations like the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. There are people that help us with those. Can you imagine 419 parks? How could we do that with only 16,000 people? So you start to get the gist of the challenge here. We're separated by space. We're separated by distance locations. Those western parks, you've been to Yellowstone or Yosemite or some of those huge parks, right? Did you know to get to a training center, it's a whole day trip for the people in the Rocky Mountain National Park from one side to the other? So we have some challenges, as everybody does. So I'd like to talk about how we've handled knowledge management and what our challenges in the past were. So forgive me if you work for Google or somebody who builds search engines. I love Google, but we use it like Kleenex, right? Everybody says, I need a Kleenex. Well, it's kind of a generic name. So when I say Google, I'm talking about search engines that you can find on the internet. So before the Common Learning Portal and the systems I'm about to share with you, this is the main place people went to find information. And they still do. But what's the problem with that? So what did Forrest Gump say at the sort of the beginning of the movie, life is like a box of chocolates. You never what you're going to get. Well, I would say Google's kind of like a box of chocolates. You really don't know what you're going to get. Is it good? It may be. Is it bad? It may be. Is it the right information? Don't know. On top of that, when I started 5 years ago, this was Ryan, raise your hand, Ryan Jennings, our IT professional in the distance learning group, gave me 30 sites that I needed to log in, become familiar with, and then a study later came up with this graphic we call the plethora of portals. But just in L&D alone, we had 30 sites, great sites, forestry service, education, sites that we built, sites that somebody else built, but 30 places, all different logins. So our other big challenge, is this a bad challenge? Well, no, but where is our knowledge? It's there. I work for the Washington, D.C. office, and Learning and Development, the office of the chief is under our workforce. And our goal is to help people. I'm getting a little, I'll try not to speak into this. Our goal is to help people with their knowledge search for their education purposes. But is that knowledge in our office? No, it's out there. We have people with PhDs out on those trails that are experts. So, the California condor, if you go to the Grand Canyon, I met a person that's his expertise. He knew every single bird by name and number out there, as he could point to them and call that out. That person, I think, wow, what a wealth of knowledge. What is the problem with that situation? What about when he retires? He leaves, she leaves, they go on, or they get a new job. How is that knowledge transferred? So those are some of our challenges. So, oops, where'd I go? So we'll come back to how we're addressing that through these slides. But first, let's talk about the systems and tools that we have right now, or that we have been developing to help us with some of those challenges. The Common Learning Portal that Kristen mentioned. This is a great project. I love this one because this project happened over the past 4.5 years. The folks that preceded me with the bank, forgive me for not getting your name correct, but the bank folks that came in front of me, you know what I'm talking about, did a great job. And they did it in what did they say, 6 months? This taken us 4.5 years, but we're government and things don't move real fast, right? When you say agile, to me, that's something contractors do, right? I'm sorry, I just have to be honest with you. Things move a little slow. But we also have a lot of processes that we have to follow to get FedRAMP, which some of you have probably heard of. And if you're in government, you live with that. To get FedRAMP, and those things take a while to get systems out. So really, 4.5 years is not probably that bad. It's probably more normal for us to get the system up and running. But I encourage you, you see the address at the bottom. This site is open to our employees, and it's open to you right now today. The mylearning.nps.gov, you can even put it in your phone. If it doesn't come up in your phone, it's because you just need to log into the internet, because it is mobile ready. Why? Because we have people on the trails. This is all they got, right? So if this is their main source of information, we've got to make sure that it works for them too. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what that product is, or that service. It's a portal. That's what it is, just quite bluntly. It is a web portal. We use, I think it's in the slide here, it uses a WordPress backend. That's irrelevant to me. Whatever works, whether it's WordPress or Drupal or something else, it's the tool that we use. It's a library. It's a library of resources. We have about 1,000 resources in it today that we call the Knowledge Park. 95% of those resources you can find and look at and search on right now. The other 5%, why not? Well, this PIV card or access card, for employees only. There's some information like law enforcement, human resources, or an archaeological, gosh, coffee's tripping me this morning. But if they find something of bones in the closet, we don't want to release that today. You'll find out about it later. So there's actually a whole training series that was built around that. Communities. Zach mentioned it earlier in his talk. Communities, so important, so important. Where do we learn from? Where do we, as adult learners, where do we get all our knowledge from to get here today? How much of it came from the colleges and institutions and universities, even if you have a PhD? The average number is about 10%, right? These are studies that I'm just quoting, and it differs person to person. How much did you learn from people? Studies say 20 to 30%. How much did you learn through finding it on your own? Informal learning, Googling, YouTube, Discovery Channel. They say about 70%. Why is that important? Well, you find something in that 70% and you're thinking, I don't quite understand that 18th century, how they stacked the stones and they didn't fall apart. And we have people that do that. So you go to your community and you ask them. And they find a YouTube video or they make one for you. Very important. Search. It's right now the Common Learning Portal is not so great on the search. It's getting better, and our contractor partner in the project, Enterprise Knowledge, is helping us to solve that with some new tools that are coming out. If you search today and it doesn't find it, you just won't find it. But in the future, hopefully, it will suggest things. It's in the cloud. Everybody knows about the cloud. We're mandated at the federal government to use the cloud, right? It's part of the FedRAMP process. And as I mentioned, WordPress. The importance to WordPress to me is one thing, and that's what's underneath. It's open source. Open source means that we have flexibility we'd never had before. And not to put down commercial systems. They're great and they have a place. But open source to the government gives us a much longer lifetime that we can use this product. WordPress has been around, since mid-2000s. It's grown significantly in its use. That system feeds itself. The reason that we want it and that we like it is because it gives us longevity to this development. We've spent some money on development and customization, and we want to protect that investment. So another tool that we've been developing also in WordPress is Administrator Officer Toolkit. That is a performance support tool. It allows these people, which day-to-day manage us, the office administration, they get us paid, they get us promoted, they get contracts in place, they manage our resources. Those people are the behind-the-scenes folks that allow the people in the hats to do their jobs. And they have to know a lot of stuff. It's hundreds and hundreds of resources. So we're vetting, curating. That word, museum, people use all the time, but we use it too, curating, to make sure that the content going into this is the right stuff. But it's a job-based performance support tool. Another thing we're working on is an IDP. Just out of curiosity, how many people out there have IDPs or in the federal government? So you know what this is about, right? There are a lot of tools probably that do this. This one's customized for us. Again, it's using open source technologies, and again, it ties into some of our other systems. The system that we use today, that we, in the past, it was called DOI Learn. DOI is Department of Interior. DOI Talent is a new system. For those of you who follow LMSs, learning management systems, or talent management systems, it's using a software called TOTRA, T-O-T-A-R-A, which is for the learning management part we use mostly is largely based on Moodle code. I can talk with you more about that later if it's something of interest to you. But for those of you that follow that, probably are familiar with those softwares. So this is a tool that we have been provided through our Department of Interior. We're a bureau. They're our agency, so they're like mom and dad, and if they give us this to use, well, that's what we're going to use. And we're good with that. We like it. It's using open source, but we don't manage it. And so that's just a thing to point out. So why is this on here? Because it's one of our systems. And my biggest goal as a program manager is that systems talk to each other so that learners don't have to figure out how to find the information, right? So let's talk about that. Anybody heard of this learning performance ecosystem stuff? It's kind of my background is more in learning development, learning design as an instructional systems specialist, but more so my background is in the implementation, development of learning technologies that all this stuff goes into. In the past, everything was in stovepipes, separated. Nothing talked to each other, nothing worked together. You had to go here, like the 30 places, to find anything or to do anything, and your record was stuck over there if you took the course over there. Our goal today is everything comes together into this learning performance ecosystem. Now, this is a nice, fancy little slide that actually is based upon the Forman-Rosenberg model that came out in 2014, talking about learning performance ecosystems. They published a paper through eLearning Guild. It's a really great read. It talks about social learning and all these things on this slide that we don't have time to go into in great detail today. But if this is a space that you're interested in working in, I highly encourage you to read that report. If you didn't get that information, come up to me later and I'll share with you where you can find that. I'm pretty sure you can search it through Google. We're going to talk about the application we have of each one of these areas in general, but the important part of this is we're bringing systems and technologies and content. Zach mentioned in his opening this morning about the importance of content. Without content, I'm not sure any of this has a lot of relevancy, quite frankly, because all of these tie content together in some way. So let me just back up a moment, because you may not be able to see this, but essentially the Forman model and learning performance ecosystems are meant to be custom to the organization. This is the model that we have adopted based upon their recommendations, but it brings together structured learning, which we talked about, the 10%, with the performance support, that 70%, feeding things to the field, to our employees, to talent management. Why is talent management important? Guess where our records are stuck, or where the information is about us, or if I completed a course that's needed for my career, or how I got hired, or my performance review. It's all in those HRIS systems. And in the past, they didn't talk to each other. Access to experts. We talk about that a lot, of the value of it, but how do we do that? And I'll share a little bit more with you on that. And a lot of that's through the social networking and collaboration. National Park Service went out on a risk. We have, I would say, and I don't know this for a fact, but probably the largest social learning network system in the government, I'm guessing. We have over 100 active communities. They establish their communities based on things they want to share within their groups. Some of them are based on a class they're taking, like our fundamentals groups have their own little social networks for just that class. Some of them are based upon interest, like the diversity, relevancy. I think one of them shares recipes. Now, I'm not sure how that ties into our learning mission, but anyway, it's fun. But some of it's based upon, I'm a supervisor. How do I connect with other people that are new supervisors? So whatever the reason they're connecting, it's for a common goal to learn from others. So let's talk about the processes. These are going to be not necessarily in any order. I'm just going to kind of throw them out there. And I hope I plan on saving some time for questions. So if I go through these a little fast, forgive me, because there's probably more slides here than we really need to get the points across. Search. The Common Learning Portal is that, as a portal, one of its main functions is to point you in the right direction. Search is so darned important. Now, as part of the search, when we mentioned to Google or not to Google. I don't care if they Google, but what we care about if they search the CLP is they find what you're looking for. And we do get reports. Ryan gives me a report of what people searched for and didn't find. What do we do with that information? Somebody mentioned content governance in the previous group. We have a content governance team that meets quarterly that's made up of different people, some of us in the room, but people from out in the parks and different places that help us decide what's supposed to go into this big thing we're created with all this content and what's the right information to put into it. So enterprise search, this is probably hard to read, but you see some faceted search down there. Where did that come from? Taxonomy is so important. This project was an education for me. I didn't know what taxonomy was until a guy named Zach Wall, somewhere around, I don't know where he is right now, but he introduced, and I thought he was talking about mounting deer heads above the fireplace, but he corrected me, and what we found is you need a taxonomy to start the process, but it's never going to be perfect. You just got to do it. You got to splash it. It's like diving into the pool. You just got to get your feet wet. It's not going to be perfect. Ours is far from perfect. But you know what? We can make it better, right? And so that's part of that governance team, and that's part of the things as we move forward. We have to continue to improve. Because how do we improve? We found out what didn't work, right? And we found out what didn't work because we defined and we tagged it and we put data against it. So the data part of the Common Learning Portal for the National Park Service, this is one of the first really IT engines that gives our learning and our workforce and our executives good data about what's going on out there. And that's exciting. That's really exciting. So, again, on structured learning, oops, I have to watch where I go here. They didn't give me a driver's license for this, just so you know. This talks about structured learning search. Our DOI Learn system, nobody could find anything. It didn't have a good tagging system. It was an older software program. The newer DOI Talent gets past a lot of that. But as in the interim phases, that's coming in and it's being stood up. Of anything, the Common Learning Portal is helping people to transition between those the old system to the new and find things that they know are there, but the way the new system performs search is a little different. So it gives them a familiar approach to finding things. We don't actually, the two systems aren't actually linked. It's a hot link. And again, my non-IT background is showing on that, but it's a hook, I think some people would call it maybe in that industry. It actually is a hard-coded URL that some of the folks in this room, Ryan and the contractors, make sure, and we teach our content people how to do that. They link directly to that course. But what it did is it allowed us to use our search engine that we're continuing to refine on the portal. So, what would this talk be like without a slide that has some really small boxes you can't read? So this is the engineering type slide. It's important. Site-wide publication. When we start getting into the nuts and bolts of why the Common Learning Portal works and is successful, or because our content processes we defined early on, and we've continued to refine. Bad content, disassociated content, it leads to bad systems. We could have the best system in the world, and I think we have a good system, but without continual review of how the content gets into the system. And then, how do we keep it fresh? So we launched April 18th, is that right? I think we launched the CLP after years and years of development being behind the firewall. We launched into the public side. It was so exciting. But our content governance team meetings are different now than they were back then because we were busy loading content. All we could do is day and night. Some folks that on the team, I don't know if Tori and Molly are here, but some of the folks from the EK team know what I mean. They were busy loading and loading. So now we got to make sure what we loaded is right, it's fresh, and if it's changed, we have to continually monitor that. So this is what our content teams look like today. Of anything that I'd say I'm most proud of is this right here today, the slide, because I still don't know how we accomplished this. I'm looking at Ryan. I still don't know how we did this. We got 65 different programs with 125 authors trained over 5 training centers in 8 regions, loading content. There was a strategy very early on. It was part of our contractor team to provide training services and part of some of the hiring people that we did in the government to ensure, and we have people today that this is their main focus, to help the folks learn to use the WordPress backend. And these are people who've never touched WordPress, but within a half a day, when they see their information created and loaded and live on the Common Learning Portal, they get really excited. And they keep loading good content. And I'm so happy that that's what we've seen. I don't have time to go in a lot of detail. Anybody, first of all, as I opened up, I said I work for you, right? I want you to take advantage of me on that. Call me. I'll go back to my information. If you want more detail how we did some of these things, I'll share it with anybody, whether you're government or non-government, because we want you to benefit from the same things that we've experienced and learned as well, because without the people helping us, we wouldn't be here today. So we train our content teams. I've already talked about that. We show them where the documentation is, where to find things. 508, does anybody know what that is? 508, accessibility. People that can't see or hear the same as a normal seeing or hearing person. We have to make sure that we cover all of that in our training, because most people don't know how to do that with an Adobe Acrobat file automatically, right? I know some folks from Harper's Ferry Center in the room, and you guys deal with this every day, because in the parks, the Interpretive Design Center, Brandon and Bob, you want to put up your hands for a second? That you provide the movies, the interpretive signs, and all those information in the parks, and all that has to be compliant with accessibility, so that people that don't have the same, ability to see or hear can take advantage of what we provide to the public. So, communities of practice, content communities of practice. We have a big, one of the first groups in our Commons, which is our social media, is dedicated to this, and it's people helping people. And I know the interpretive folks are very active in this. Excuse me. So I mentioned in the beginning that we're very decentralized. I don't know if I emphasized that. As a government bureau, they don't come any more decentralized than us. Do you know how the National Park Service started? Basically, Yellowstone Park was getting pillaged and stuff done to it, and they wanted to protect it and to get back into the, I think, post-Civil War. We had Union soldiers that were no longer fighting the war, and they said, what better purpose than to protect something so much of a treasure as Yellowstone Park? So they actually put the Union soldiers in Yellowstone. So Yellowstone was really the first national park, and then it's followed by some other parks, I believe, Yosemite, Grand Canyon. I don't have the exact order sequence right, but the actual National Park Service as a bureau didn't come until 1916. So it started out there in the parks. So as a bureau, it was already going before the national part of it started. So essentially it kind of started from bottom up instead of top down. So we're not a hierarchy type of organization like Department of Defense so much that. So from regulation standpoint, we had to take all that into consideration. How do we manage content? How do we manage how people use the system? So we wanted it as democratic and open as possible, but also be able to make sure that we kept the quality of standard. It's a challenge. This diagram kind of shows some of the players in that, but it's by no means all of the players. What I will say is that, so I'm just checking my time to see how we're doing. Our organization has, of course, a director, right now an acting director, and then we have deputy directors. And so the deputy director we fall under, one of the concerns she expressed to me in a meeting when I was briefing her just before launch is that, and her name is Lena McDowell, and so Lena said, I'm concerned about how we make sure that our administrative content is accurate and it's right. And I thought about it for a second. I said, Lena, I can't guarantee that for you, but I can guarantee the one thing. The CLP, the Common Learning Portal, is like a spotlight on content. It suddenly illuminates things and places and closets and dark places that weren't previously illuminated. And when you do that to content, if it wasn't right, it becomes right. It lets us see bad content and make it good, right? So even though it may have been exposed for a short amount of time, it's much better than it was in that closet and bad the whole time. So it's a spotlight. It shines the light on what you want it to see. And so it by nature is self-governing. It by nature makes content better. Do people always agree? Do doctors always agree? No. And sometimes we have to get involved with coming to an agreement on which content is right and who's the publisher. But at the end of the day, our team doesn't, I don't want to say we don't care, we do care, but at the end of the day, we just want to make sure the content is there. And it may be two differences of opinions when we publish both, but our goal is to make sure the content is available. So performance support tools, I'm going to kind of buzz through this so we have some time for questions. Performance support tools means getting the things to the person in the workflow at the time of need, all the time, every time. And in the past, we said learning just in time. We're saying no, learning all the time. Because performance support tools give us that flow chart, that diagram, that job aid, that YouTube video. I used to ask how many people use YouTube. Okay, how many of you do not use YouTube when you have a problem with a home trying to fix something or your car? It's almost the rule. If you don't know how to do it, YouTube it, right? Well, guess what we're doing? We're building a lot of 3-minute videos on how to do stuff, all the way from that stonemasonry position to how to fix things, to chainsaw safety. How do you properly cut a tree that's horizontal? I never knew that. I'm an amateur at it and dangerous. But yeah, you cut it from the bottom up. Well, yeah, it's all in there. It's So performance support tools are not this huge course. It's the SCORM course, for those of you that know what that means. If you don't worry about it. It is providing at the moment of need the place, whether it's on this device or a person's computer, that tool that helps you do your job. So some more examples of, if you can see the one on top, this is a search, and it lists the job aid on top. Effigy mounds, I can't play that video for you right now. I think some of that's is probably being released in the public. But that was an embarrassing situation. You can Google it, and it will tell you what happened. But the videos are just so compelling on the story. And Effigy mounds is it Ohio, I think? But it was India. It's a national park where Indian mounds are the feature of the park. Last but not least, and really on the tool sets, social learning collaboration. Again, we're kind of out on the limb. We're taking a lot of risk. The first thing, my goal, it took me a while to do it because, again, I'm federal government, but we hired a learning communities manager. If you're going to do social, whether it's a government or whether it is corporate, get somebody who focuses on that to watch it for you and just help train people and lead people. So far, knock on this, we haven't had an incident. I think the value of it's so much greater than the risk. It is a high risk, but it's a very high reward because people learn from people. We have so many experts that are so far away from each other. We have our interpretive and education rangers that I subscribe to that group. I keep thinking I'll unsubscribe because I get dozens of emails a day that it automatically forwards. But they talk and they learn and they post things and they say, how could I do this better? This is my presentation. Will you take a look at it? A lot of benefit from that. And that leads to the access to experts. Who's an expert in this room? Who's not? You all know something that somebody else probably doesn't. I mean, whether we're self-proclaimed or somebody proclaimed us an expert, if you know something, share it. And people will seek you out if they know you're the expert too, right? Experts are usually pretty busy people. So just tying into the talent management, we talked about that, how we tie into talent management. We talked about our systems. We're not completely there yet on this slide. We still have room to grow because we're dealing with a couple of new systems. The IT side have to handshake, and there's securities and things that have to be done. But we're getting there. That's the good news. So what's next? I threw some things on here. There's probably, my crystal ball doesn't work every day, but this is stuff that it kind of plopped out the other day. Data visualization. I'm constantly being asked for a dashboard by our leadership. And I'm like, do you want to model a dashboard, or do you want one out of the Tesla, which is not mine, but you know, if it was, which dashboard do you want? Well, if you grew up in the 1930s, you probably wouldn't know what a Tesla dashboard's telling you. This is electric, but dashboards, we're leaning towards customization and tools that provide that person from their perspective what they want to see. We're not yet there yet, and if those of you that want to help us out, we'll help you with anything you want from us, but if you can help us with that, that would be great. Connectivity, I talked about that with other systems, better, easier mobile access. Do you know, for those of you that have been in the Western parks, how much mobile cell phone service did you have in the Grand Tetons? Or yeah, some of that's deliberate because in the past, a lot of the leadership didn't want people Facebooking and Twittering while they were in the parks. I just have to tell you that. That's true, and people will verify that. But they're also not necessarily profitable for commercial vendors to have mobile service all throughout the Grand Tetons. So at the end of the day, we're trying to build systems that people can take on the backpack and their iPad that may not be connected all the time. That's just, you know, it's reality for us. So offline capabilities, really important to us. Again, if you're already good at this, share it with us, please. This is something I threw in for all the folks here that I'm trying to speak your language. Synonym and metadata correlation. So I'm learning as I go with this, but we have a lot of taxonomy that's developed over the past year since we went live, and some of it is we're saying, is that what we wanted to say? Or is that what we should be saying? Or this person's searching for this, but they're finding this. So that's where the folks in this room that are helping us, and I'd like for everybody just to stand that's involved in this project right now, whether you're with a contractor or consultant or part of the team. And Ryan, that would be you and some of you. If you have more questions about what I talked about today with the Common Learning Portal or some of these systems, you don't have to find me if I'm somewhere you'll see me. These folks right here can help answer your questions. I'm more than happy to try to answer, but I'm not going to be the expert in all these areas. I may point you to one of these folks and say, that's who you really need to talk with. This is me in the office, by the way. So if you want to get in touch with me in the office, that's my email. But that's it for me, and how are we doing for questions? We have a couple of minutes, a few minutes. What do we have till? We've got about 10 minutes for questions. I see somebody in the back. Well, I see two hands. First of all, the lady, yeah, you with the glasses. I saw yours first.
The article you mentioned about the learning components, can you reiterate the name and author of the article?
Steve Forman and Mark Rosenberg. But if you Google Steve Forman, F-O-R-E-M-A-N, you will, and just Google that with learning and performance ecosystems. I think you'll find what you're looking for. There's actually, 3 or 4 white papers he's published. The 2014 version is the one I'd start with. It kind of started that movement. And another question here?
Hi, my name is Jill. I also am a Department of Interior employee. I work at the USG Electrical Survey.
Oh, cool. Thanks for joining us.
Could you talk a little bit
By the way, the system and you actually as an employee have access to all the information that our employees do, just so you know. But anyway, go ahead.
Could you talk a little bit more about sort of leading up to getting this site developed? What were some of the, how did you guys get buy-in from Park Service to get this off the ground?
That's a great question. There was a lot of luck involved. There was a lot of timing, but it started with. I don't know if you know Mike Reynolds. He was our acting director for a while, but he was over workforce. He came in. I started this job, and he started his job. A little bit different pay grade there, but he started the same day I did. But he was relatively new, and I was relatively new, and I had all these training managers that said we got all these portals. We need a place to put our information where people can find it, and I thought I was hired to build e-learning, which I've been doing for 25 plus years, and they corrected me on, so they said we need to build this learning system. I found out it's been a project that had stalled out 5 years before I came on board. But anyway, they didn't tell me that part. It was a setup, right? So we had the fortune of a new associate director, and it was the end of year time. I had just given them a spiel on about building the system, and things just happened at the right time. They had some end-of-year funds, not a lot in the big picture, but we put them on with a small developer that got us started. We continued to get it funded. We wrote up larger work statements. We gathered momentum. There was a lot of places this project almost didn't happen. Bless their heart, the IR, Information Resources, which is short for our IT people and the NPS and DOI, they stopped us a bunch of times. It wouldn't have taken probably 4.5 years if we hadn't get past some of those hurdles. And some of them had to do with, one of them was WordPress. They had an issue with WordPress. Why? Because nobody else was using it in the department in National Park Service. So we found through our resources, our contractor partners, the connection at GSA, and they said, oh yeah, we use WordPress, no issues. We use it every day to build websites for some of our customers. So that was an example, but we had to deal with FedRAMP and get funds for the department cloud. There was a lot of hurdles, and I'd have to say, sitting here today, I'm still amazed actually that we got that site built. But one of the advantages of a small bureau like the National Park Service, I know that we're a little larger than you guys, but relative to DOD and other bureaus, is we do have more flexibility. I joked and said we're not agile, but before this I was FBI Academy for a couple of years, and before that I was in DOD land, and they're not nearly as agile as we are because we're smaller. And I think really if I had to put one thing behind what made this happen was the passion of the learning community and the community itself of wanting this so badly. And that passion spilled over to statements to our leadership that weren't coming from Dale. They were coming from people out there saying, we really need this system. We as experts want a place that we can have our knowledge transferred to the next generation. So behind it, I have to say, in my 5 years at the National Park Service, and I'm sure it's true in the USGS, but the passion that people have goes a long ways. Sometimes when you have very little funds or resources, the passion makes up for it. Yeah. Another question?
If you had to do it all over again, what would you do differently? Sorry, that's not a trick.
Yeah, no, and I thought I had the answer for this the other day. I think One is we just didn't know everything we needed to know up front. And if I had to do over again, that's not saying we would. But if we were able to seek out somebody that had already been down this path to get us pointed, we could have saved ourselves some missteps probably by doing a little bit more research with outside of our organization that might have helped, I think. Might be part of the answer. I don't know. Ryan, can you think of anything?
It was unusual for a learning and development office to stand up an IT system of this nature, especially in Park Service. So a lot of the missteps we had was because we didn't have the inside knowledge of the IR director.
Yeah, that's. If I think of something else, I'll let you know later. But another hand.
Talked a lot about the communities and the value of those. How self-service are they in terms of being able to create their own electronic space within this forum?
That's a great question. So the site has program spaces that we, through our governance committee, we actually control. We don't want thousands of landing pages that are duplicative. But to create a knowledge park or an article, as we call them, or in WordPress land it's a post, but we've glamorized it and made it look more like an article. Anybody can post that. So there's a lot of flexibility. Now we do, if somebody posts something that's bad, we have people, an editor that can corral that, or if it's missing 508. But anybody could post or create news that has a program landing page. But another thing that there's so much flexibility built in that it's almost scary is the ability to create one of those social groups in the Commons. There's a self-tutorial on the site that says, want to create a page? And you follow that. And Molly Russell, who is the Learning Communities Manager, will help people with that. And so she will suggest and say, well, maybe you want a private group because you want to make sure that the people coming into it are of the same interest or whatever. But it's pretty darn open, quite frankly. The program landing page, we approve usually about 90% of the requests. The main thing is we say, you have to have content. If you want a program landing page and you've only got one article or you've only got one person feeding it, that may not be successful. So we have a few parameters, but it's pretty open. Another question? I think we have time for maybe one more question.
I'm curious about your evaluation plan. Is you have a plan in place for evaluating the effectiveness of the portal?
We had a strategy, a communication strategy. We still do. Actually, we're working with Kristen in that today. That you could probably catch her and get more information than I can cover in the 1 minute. But it's not so much of an evaluation plan in terms of what we would call that in the learning community. It's more about how we evaluate the success of the portal based upon the data that we're collecting. How many people are hitting on what are the trends? And so that's more of how we're assessing the portal today. In terms of a formal plan, I don't know that we have one really written out other than a communications plan.
It's something that we're developing at the moment, actually. So we're having a lot of working sessions around that so that we can be able to sort of measure and track our progress as it relates to just showing how valuable the system really is to the service.
We could probably do a little better, too, in having more of a formal plan, I think. That's it for time, I think, right? And so I thank you so much for your attentiveness and your interest in what we're doing. And I hope that you've gained something from this presentation. And again, if I can myself, my team, help you in any way possible with something that we can share with you, please, by all means, let us know. Thank you.